Bob Nightengale in the USA Today wrote this: the Houston Astros may have to win the World Series for GM James Click to keep his job. And perhaps even then, that might not be enough for his job security. Astros owner Jim Crane has never warmed up to him and has long questioned whether he's the right guy for the job despite the Astros' success. If Click is indeed fired, the Astros are expected to reach out to the Baltimore Orioles for permission to speak to Orioles assistant GM Sig Mejdal, who worked in the Astros front office, apologies if I butchered the pronunciation, under former GM Jeff Luhnow. He left in November of 2018 to join Mike Elias when he was hired as the Orioles general manager. That was an interesting tidbit. And it has me wondering about something. This is a philosophical question when it comes to sports. Do you like a hands-on owner running the show for your franchise? And you can answer that at 713-780-3776. 713-780-ESPN. Jim Crane is a little bit more hands-on these days, and you can understand why, right? Especially with what took place with Jeff Luhnow, Carlos Beltran, and all the sign-stealing scandal situations. I think he wanted to make sure that the ship's a little bit more tight. And this is also a guy in Jim Crane who isn't a baseball idiot. Jim Crane was actually a pretty damn good pitcher when he was in college. I believe it's at Central Missouri State. Could be getting the school wrong, but this is a guy who had 20 wins in a season as a pitcher. So he knows his baseball. I'm not acting like he is a phenomenal scout or something like that, but this is a guy who does have a bit of a baseball background. So maybe you trust him a little bit more. He knows the game, at the very least. He's not some corporate suit that just bought a franchise for the sake of racking up the profits. When you read that piece from Bob Nightengale and combine it with something that Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic wrote, if Houston doesn't win the World Series or peters out in the postseason, a change could be made at the general manager position. It makes you think back about what Jim Crane might be frustrated with. This is about 2 months ago or so, on August 1st, which was the first of a 2-day sequence where the Astros acquired first Trey Mancini from the Baltimore Orioles on August 1st. And then on the second, they acquired, of course, Will Harris, the relief pitcher, the lefty, and Christian Vazquez, the catcher from the Boston Red Sox. Again, Jim Crane asked about trade deadline moves and moves still to come on August 1st.
We think it's the right move at the right time. We'd like to make a couple more moves. We'll see what happens.
Where are y'all at in terms of potential other moves?
Well, all the obvious ones. I can't give you all the details on them. They're still negotiating this and that. We got till 5 o'clock tomorrow. A lot of times these go right down to the buzzer, and so, we're focused on getting something done and improving the team, and that's where we're at.
Sounds like someone who wants more. Do you think that Will Harris and Christian Vazquez classify as more to Jim Crane?
Will Smith.
Check that. Did I say Will Harris?
Will Harris is the guy who gave up the home run 2019.
You know what? Will Smith gives me Will Harris vibes, Sean Mapes. That's how I'm going to pretend that I had that right.
Oh, okay.
I appreciate the correction, though. Will Smith, not giving you exactly the best performance to this point. Vazquez, I like. Trey Mancini, I like. But we're talking about a designated hitter / first baseman that can't really play in the outfield. And we're talking about a catcher / designated hitter for a team that had a pretty good idea that it wasn't going to have Michael Brantley for the playoffs. They did not get an outfielder. Who else could they have been going after? I don't know. Jim Crane was pushed a little bit further. That audio courtesy of Mark Berman, of course, of Fox 26, was then asked to follow up, is there room to add salary? Are you willing to go over budget?
Do you have room in the budget to add salary?
Yeah, the threshold is a little higher now, and we were quite a bit below that. And yeah, we've got room to do what we need to do.
We're quite a bit below that. I thought that was telling. I think that means that Jim Crane wanted a whole lot more at the trade deadline, and I don't think that the day after those comments, August 2nd, necessarily made him feel better about that. And as we piece all the tea leaves together, here is General Manager James Click of the Houston Astros after all of the Astros trade deadline moves were done and the deadline had passed.
This is part of why I came here. This is part of what excited me about the Houston Astros is that Jim Crane wants to win, and he wants to win every year. And he gives us the freedom to come up with ways to do that. But at the same time, he is pushing us to be aggressive, to go out there and make the trades that we need to make, to get the players that we need to get, to put a competitive product on the field each and every year. I think he's an exemplar of what owners in this game want to be. We all want to win, and having Jim having our back and pushing us is just it's a tremendous thing to have in the front office.
I mean, does that not sound like a bit of ass kissing? Sean Mapes, you were laughing at that. Is that not ass kissing?
I mean, it's 45 seconds of smooching behind.
And who has problems with somebody publicly smooching their boss? Like, that's how the world works.
Yeah, he's not going to get out there and be like, God, I wish you'd get off my back.
Yeah, God, Jim Crane's always telling me I need to make trades.
He just wants to win, all right? I came from Tampa.
We win on a shoestring budget. Man, he's telling me that I have more budget to work with. I don't like that. I'm a little cheap. This is uncomfortable for me.
Back in Tampa, the only time the owner talked to me was to raise the popcorn prices, all right?
So a little smooching there. And I mean, I think that's consistent with the current situation. And I'll ask again, do you want a hands-on owner? As brought up on the Twitch line, twitch.tv/Gallant says, Virginia Buttonweed says, being hands-on got the Astros Justin Verlander. It's a good point. Rainman1999 says, hands-on? I don't know if I want that in an owner, but I want someone who's committed to winning. Poor Marine, meanwhile, says, I want him to be hands-on and committed to winning. I don't think Jim Crane being hands-on has been a bad thing for the Astros. It could theoretically be one down the road, but none of us should have been happy with what took place at the trade deadline. And that was the first thing I brought up, is that you need outfield depth, and you didn't get any, and now you still have this weird, confusing jigsaw puzzle every single day when it comes to what you're doing in the outfield. It's confusing. And, you know, the other piece of this, Dusty Baker's future being uncertain, it's probably going to resolve itself in the postseason when a Dusty Baker lineup theoretically could submarine the Astros. All it takes is one day where he decides to maybe put the wrong guys out there. He can only control what he can control, you know. He's not the one that's going out to buy the groceries, Dusty Baker, but this is also a guy that we've had a lot of questions about over the course of the year. My own personal stance on this, I generally like owners to be far, far away when it comes to day-to-day operations of an organization in terms of determining personnel and determining who actually plays out there. And I bring it up because when I was but a wee lad, 7 years old, I remember the Patriots and Packers were about to play each other in a Super Bowl, and there was a lot of drama going on in New England about whether or not Bill Parcells was actually going to remain the coach of the Patriots after that game. He was rumored to be going to the New York Jets. And here was his rationale. Bill Parcells on, I believe, January 27th of 1996.
They want you to cook the dinner. At least they ought to let you shop for some of the groceries.
You can understand how a hands-on owner could be too much. But the question for you today on the most interactive sports talk show in Houston at 713-780-3776, 713-780-ESPN. Do you want a hands-on owner? And are you okay with Jim Crane being a hands-on owner? Because when reports like this come out, that is an owner being hands-on. That is an owner making it clear that, hey, look, we got standards to meet, and even if those standards are met, I'm not 100% sure that I'm going to keep this current power structure in place. Do you think that the issue between Jim Crane and James Click that might lead to Click being fired is about Justin Verlander's future? Verlander has a player option for next season. He is likely going to opt out because as the guy who ends the season with the most wins in the American League and the best ERA in the American League, he's going to get paid a bleep ton on the open market this offseason should he opt out. But I also think that Jim Crane wants to bring him back. Why wouldn't he? Why would you assume that he is going to fall off at any point soon? This is his career best season in many statistical categories. 1.75 ERA. Only Pedro Martinez, who I watched firsthand in 2000 at 1.74, had lower. And again, we're talking about a 39-year-old Justin Verlander. And looking at what Tom Brady at least was doing the last 2 years in Tampa Bay, would you want to move on from someone like Verlander? If you're Jim Crane, a guy who actually knows baseball because he played it, maybe not the smartest baseball guy out there, but I certainly trust his gut instincts on things. He's a guy who's going to want to keep Justin Verlander going forward. So what is it that's the biggest issue between Crane and Click? And I think it is Justin Verlander. And I actually think that James Click would have a strong argument. He's coming from the Tampa Bay Rays. And I'm assuming that this is a guy who is looking to find ways to make it so that this Astros team is financially responsible going forward. And you can't blame him on that front. But as we played comments from Jim Crane yesterday saying that we are willing to go over budget, did you know that the Astros are paying the 9th most for their baseball players in all of baseball this year? I'm sure that he would have liked a little bit more, and maybe at the trade deadline, adding a little bit of extra salary is something that they talked about, and James Click maybe wasn't able to get done. But I wonder if the big issue is whether or not James Click thinks that they can win without Justin Verlander. I think they have a strong case as to yes, they can. I mean, look at the guys that they have under team control from a pitching perspective for the next couple of years. You have Lance McCullers under contract until 2026. Of course, you have injury issues with Lance McCullers on a regular basis. Are you expecting him to be there every single year? I don't know. Framber Valdez is in arbitration for each of the next 3 years before becoming an unrestricted free agent in 2026. Luis Garcia is under arbitration through 2026. Okay, so that's 2 guys that you feel pretty good about in the starting rotation. Valdez, of course, a lot more than Luis Garcia. Christian Javier, free agent, 2026. Jose Urquidy, free agent, 2026. You got a ton of pitchers, and now all of a sudden you're bringing up Hunter Brown. Is that somebody else that you want to work into the rotation? I wonder if this was Justin Verlander's last start for the Houston Astros. If you think it was, 713-780-3776, and I am curious as to what you think that the Astros should do. I think we're all in agreement that they should keep Justin Verlander. If he pitched like that last year, pay him. Max Scherzer, I believe the contract that he got most recently, Sean, what was it? I remember we talked about it yesterday after the show.
It was 3 years, $130 million. So that's 43.3 a year.
You can do that, right? I mean, I feel like there's an exception that can be made, and I think Jim Crane is willing to make an exception for a guy in Verlander. It seems like they have a little bit more of a close relationship than you would traditionally expect an owner and a pitcher to have. So I'm very curious to see how that goes. I do think that is the big sticking point, perhaps, between between James Click and between Jim Crane.